You keep hearing that making 75 or even $100,000 puts you solidly in the middle class. But does it really? In some cities, that barely helps you cover rent, and just forget about savings at that point. So in today's video, we're going to talk about a few places where it does put you in the middle class, and a few places where you have absolutely no shot.
Stop wasting money on that dumb shit and instead put it in investment. I know it's tempting to spend it and be broke again.
Welcome back, guys. I'm your bro Taylor.
And I'm your bro Ryan.
And like Ryan just said, that middle class label is kind of just broken because depending on where you look, a lot of people define the middle class as anything making between 2/3 and double the median income in this country, which can be anywhere from $50,000 to $150,000. Now, there are very few places that $50,000 should be considered middle class.
Yeah, and that's the average income across the whole United States. When you start getting into micro markets in terms of cities or even just states, talking about Arkansas cost of living versus California cost of living is drastically different. Then maybe you are middle class in one versus the other.
Yeah.
So it just definitely varies, and we're going to get a little bit more into that starting now. So let's say you make $80,000 a year. That's technically middle class according to the average across the United States. However, we're living in San Francisco. So looking at a couple of numbers, the average rent per month for a one-bedroom in San Francisco is $3,000. Your groceries are typically going to be about $600. Your transportation, car, gas, all of that is going to be about $300. However, that's probably not really realistic for a car payment. That's more just gas and maintenance, etc. like that.
Yeah, so those expenses are high enough, but then when you factor in your state and federal taxes, I mean, at the most, part of your income is being charged 30%, but effectively, your income is being charged an average of 15%. So you're left with maybe $1,100 a month. So you have about $1,000 if nothing goes wrong. And we're not even factoring in these other things like insurance, your phone bill, utilities, the cost of going out and actually enjoying life. And it's going to be the same thing in places like New York and other places with a high cost of living where your rent, your groceries, going out just cut so much into that income. And your tax rate's pretty effectively high to where you're left with almost nothing. So things like childcare and going out and saving are just kind of out of reach for your normal person.
Yeah, so again, as we said, you are technically in the middle class, but you're left with nothing. If you had a car payment, which I think the average car payment, used car payment, is right around $500, that's half of that gone. Now everything else to live is $500, $600. It doesn't really seem possible. So realistically, you're probably not in the middle class in that area.
Yeah, 100%. Because I mean, when you look at what our parents thought of what middle class is versus what people nowadays are kind of viewing as middle class, there's such a discrepancy right there. And it's very unfortunate. Just the cost of living is demolishing people.
Yeah, since the 1980s, the cost of housing has more than quintupled, but wages have barely tripled in that same amount of time. And yeah, that's just one aspect, is housing has gone up way faster than wages. What about everything else that feels like it's gone up exponentially in cost, including student loans and the cost of education?
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, student debt is kind of a rent payment in itself. So even if you feel like you're doing everything right, you're saving, you're going to college, you're budgeting, you're still just scraping by. I mean, you're stressed paycheck to paycheck, just like most Americans are. Because like we kind of talked about earlier, the middle class used to mean sometimes you could have a single parent working and the other one be able to stay home. You'd be able to afford a home and retire at a decent age. Nowadays, it just means that you're living paycheck to paycheck. You're still very stressed about it. Chances are you're not saving. I mean, the average age of someone that's able to afford a home has increased drastically over just the last few years. And like we kind of touched on at the very beginning, I mean, $50,000 is considered middle class in some regards. And I mean, that's just not going to work in that example of like San Francisco. The rent itself, you wouldn't be able to afford that. Places like Arkansas, where the rent's averaging around like $1,000 in, say, a city like Little Rock, I mean, maybe you'd be able to scrape by. So obviously in those kind of situations, maybe you don't need that full $150,000, but it just goes to show that the cost of living varies widely. I mean, some of the states with the lower cost of living are places like Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, West Virginia, and Oklahoma. Places like that, you might be able to scrape by, but even then, I mean, you're struggling.
So yeah, the middle class used to be somewhere you could live. Now it does feel like you're always getting pushed. You're always getting stressed. You have no money left at the end of the month. That's what it feels like a lot of times now. So the middle class, that's why they say it's disappearing. It's becoming harder to make that middle area make sense, where you're not thriving, but you're not dying. So again, we don't want to make this video to scare anybody or to just throw a lot of bad news at you. Honestly, the point of this is just you have to be more particular about where you choose to live. That plays a much bigger factor in your quality of life than it used to. While you might want to live in California for many personal reasons, it might be too expensive for your income, and you might need to look at similar places to California or smaller areas in California.
Yeah.
You just have to be more particular about where you live, because that $50,000 goes a lot further in certain states and cities than it does in others. And so that's where it gets a little bit harder. If you make it rich and you're making ultra wealthy billionaire money, you can live wherever you want.
Hey.
But I know we aren't, so we have to
Yeah.
be more particular about where we choose to live and how we choose to live in those areas.
I mean, we've made those decisions ourselves. You know, certain markets that we look at, there are certain neighborhoods we just can't afford. That's the reality that you live in. I mean, even if it's like, oh, it's so much closer to work. Well, you know, it's going to cost you a lot more, that convenience and everything. People know what markets are hot and they're willing to pay more. So that's just the reality. And again, we're not trying to throw any shade. If you make 70, 60, 50, whatever it may be, don't be discouraged by that. In certain areas, you're doing great. In other areas, the reality is that you're probably stressed out. And I mean, obviously, we're not trying to discourage you. Budgeting is a huge thing in that. Check out the rest of our channel for some great budgeting tips. But we wanted to just present this video as more educational.
So we really hope we didn't just scare you. We really hope you guys got something out of this video. You learned a little bit, but at the same time, you may be questioning, oh wait, I was thinking about making this move to this area. Maybe I need to do a little bit more research, because it is a very big decision. So we just hope we warned you, but at the same time, we helped you make that decision a little bit. And we can dive way deeper in a lot of these states and cities. If you want to know how far $50,000 goes in all these states, we can make that video. Just as always, please let us know in the comments. We'd love to get that feedback, and we'd love to make that video if that's what you really want. Other than that, don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And as always, stay tuned for the next one.
Stop wasting money on that dumb shit and instead put it in investment. I know it's tempting, you'll spend it and be broke again.